Hello, BookTube, and we're sticking with essays of today for our essay. And this is a collection that was published in 1925 by George Harrop and Company Limited, and it was selected by F.H. Pritchard. Mine is the fifth printing. I might have said fourth yesterday when we did George Gissing's My Books, but it is indeed the fifth printing. Today, we're going to read A Defense of Detective Stories by G.K. Chesterton that originally appeared in The Defendant. In attempting to reach the genuine psychological reason for the popularity of detective stories, it is necessary to rid ourselves of many mere phrases. It is not true, for example, that the populace prefer bad literature to good and accept detective stories because they are bad literature. The mere absence of artistic subtlety does not make a book popular. Bradshaw's Railway Guide contains few gleams of psychological comedy, yet it is not read aloud uproariously on winter evenings. If detective stories are read and with more exuberance than railway guides, it is certainly because they are more artistic. Many good books have fortunately been popular. Many bad books, still more fortunately, have been unpopular. A good detective story would probably be even more popular than a bad one. The trouble in this matter is that many people do not realize that there is such a thing as a good detective story. It is to them like speaking of a good devil. To write a story about a burglar is, in their eyes, a sort of spiritual manner of committing it. To persons of somewhat weak sensibility, this is natural enough. It must be confessed that many detective stories are as full of sensational crime as one of Shakespeare's plays. There is, however, between the good detective story and the bad detective story as much, or rather more, difference than there is between a good epic and a bad epic. Not only a detective story is a perfectly legitimate form of art, but it has certain definite and real advantages as to the agent of the public weal. The first essential value of the detective story lies in this, that it is the earliest and the only form of popular literature in which is expressed some sense of the poetry of modern life. Men lived among mighty mountains and eternal forests for ages before they realized that they were poetical. It may reasonably be inferred that some of our descendants may see the chimney pots as rich a purple as the mountain peaks, and find the lamp-posts as old and natural as the trees. Of this realization of a great city itself as something wild and obvious, the detective story is certainly the Iliad. No one can have failed to notice that in the stories the hero or the investigator crosses London with something of the loneliness and liberty of a prince in a tale of Elfland. That in the course of that incalculable journey, the casual omnibus assumes the primal colors of the fairy ship. The lights of the city begin to glow like innumerable goblin eyes, since they are the guardians of some secret, however crude, which the writer knows and the reader does not. Every twist of the road is like a finger pointing to it. Every fantastic skyline of chimney pots seems wildly and derisively signaling the meaning of the mystery. This realization of the poetry of London is not a small thing. A city is, properly speaking, more poetic than the countryside, for while nature is a chaos of unconscious forces, a city is a chaos of conscious ones. The crest of the flower or the pattern of the lichen may or may not be significant signals, but there is no stone in the street and no brick in the wall that is not actually a deliberate symbol, a message from some man, as much as if it were a telegram or a postcard. The narrowest street possesses, in every crook and twist of its intention, the soul of the man who built it, perhaps long in his grave. Every brick has as human a hieroglyph as if were a graven brick of Babylon. Every slate on the roof is as educational a document as if it were a slate covered with addition and subtraction sums. Anything which tends, even under the fantastic form of the minutiae of Sherlock Holmes, to assert this romance of detail and civilization, to emphasize this unfathomably human character in flints and tiles, is a good thing. It is good that the average man should fall into the habit of looking imaginatively at 10 men in the street, even if it is only on the chance that the 11th might be a notorious thief. We may dream, perhaps, that it might be possible to have another and higher romance of London, that men's souls have stranger adventures than their bodies, and that it would be harder and more exciting to hunt their virtues than to hunt their crimes. But since our great authors, with the admirable exception of Stevenson, declined to write of that thrilling mood and moment when the eyes of the great city, like the eyes of a cat, begin to flame in the dark, we must give our credit to the popular literature which, amid a babble of pedantry and precocity, declines to regard the present as prosaic or common as commonplace. Popular art in all ages has been interested in contemporary manners and costume. It dressed the groups around the crucifixion in the garb of Florentine gentlefolk or Flemish burghers. In the last century it was the custom of distinguished actors to present Macbeth in a powdered wig and ruffles. How far are we ourselves in this age from such conviction of the poetry of our own life and manners may easily be conceived by anyone who chooses to imagine a picture of Alfred the Great toasting the cakes dressed in tourist knickerbockers, or a performance of Hamlet in which the prince appeared in a frock coat with a crape band around his hat. But this instinct of the age to look back, like Lot's wife, could not go on forever. A rude popular literature of the romantic possibilities of the modern city was bound to arise. It has arisen in the popular detective stories, as rough and refreshing as the ballads of Robin Hood. There is, however, another good work that is done by detective stories. While it is the constant tendency of the old Adam to rebel against so universal and automatic a thing as civilization, to preach departure and rebellion, the romance of the police actively keeps in some sense before the mind the fact that civilization itself is the most sensational of departures and the most romantic of rebellions. By dealing with the unsleeping sentinels who guard the outposts of society, it tends to remind us that we live in an armed camp, making war with the chaotic world, and that the criminals, the children of chaos, are nothing but the traitors within our gates. When the detective is a police romance stands alone, and somewhat fatuously fearless amid the knives and fists of thieves' kitchen, it does certainly serve to make us remember that it is the agent of social justice who is the original and poetic figure, while the burglars and footpads are merely placid old cosmic conservatives, happy in the immemorial respectability of apes and wolves. The romance of the police force is thus the whole romance of man. It is housed in the fact that morality is the most dark and daring of conspiracies. It reminds us that the whole noiseless and unnoticeable police management by which we are ruled and protected is only a successful knight-errantry. And in typical G.K. Chesterton fashion, he's talking not just about detective stories. He throws a little bit in there about society, obviously, his views on society and politics. That's the interesting thing with Chesterton. It's more than meets the eye, especially in his essays. And the other thing that I find interesting, well, it's not that I find it interesting, but it's because he refers to Lot. And, how many people today under a certain age would know what he's referring to, or even the Robin Hood ballads and things like that. These would have been sort of more or less common knowledge, I would have thought, at the turn of the 19th, 20th century to most middle-class people. But how many middle-class people have read the Bible? How many middle-class people know the legend of Robin Hood more than the Kevin Costner, other than the Kevin Costner film, if they even know that. And there might even be a newer one that I'm not aware of. But yeah, and then he has a little dig at Shakespeare, in a couple places. But yeah, and also too, he mentions Bradshaw's railway guides. Do people know what a Bradshaw railway guide is? It's just little things like that I find interesting. That's where sometimes this doesn't have any notes. But I suppose in a sort of critical way, they could put little notes in, a little explaining of what he's referring to. But also, would you need to put notes in that he's poking a little fun at Shakespeare, or at society, of how society is made up, or his views of society, and especially his political view there near the end? Do you really need to put that in? I don't know, because that is left up to the reader to discern. And but with Chesterton, you're going to get something more than just the superficial story in the essay. That's why I like the his fiction, but I don't get along with it as much as his nonfiction, his essays. His essays they're beautiful at times. It's like Arnold Bennett as well. They're just really, really good. I think there's a little faultiness in some of his writing. I think he rushed them off very quickly, and where sort of it's cumbersome under the tongue to say the sentence, because it's not as smooth as it could be. But even with that, they are gems. And I do have another collection somewhere of G.K. Chesterton, a small one, and I can't find it when I found this, because that was stuck in behind other books that were lined up in front, so that was sort of hidden for however long, a year or more, and I knew I had this, and I thought that might have been the collection, but it's not. But there is another small collection that I have somewhere here of G.K. Chesterton, but I haven't been able to put my hands on it for about 6 or 8 months now, but I know it's somewhere. So I'm hoping I can find it again sometime. But in the meantime, I'm going to have to deal with what little bits I have in different places until I can get more of Chesterton. But anyway, that's gone over 12 minutes. We're at 13 now, so I will end it there. BookTube, if you have any thoughts regarding Chesterton or any essays like that, do let us know. Take care. Bye.